In this video, we discuss different forms of sovereign risk. So essentially, we will discuss the difference between debt repudiation and debt rescheduling, and we will also see some examples as well as some historical backgrounds behind these different forms of sovereign risk. A good deal of misunderstanding exists regarding the nature of sovereign risk events. In general, a sovereign country's decisions, the negative decisions on its debt obligations or the obligations of its public and private organization may take two forms. One is repudiation, another is rescheduling. To be simple, debt repudiation is an outright cancellation of all a borrower's current and future foreign debt and equity obligations. Okay, so it's an outright cancellation of all obligations, current and futures. Debt rescheduling, on the other hand, as I indicated in the last video, and which is also more common, a country or a group of creditors in that country declares a moratorium or delay on its current and future debt obligations and then seeks to ease credit terms through a rescheduling of the contractual terms such as debt maturity and or interest rates. Such delays may relate to the principal or interest on debt. Okay, so the main difference is debt repudiation is a cancellation of foreign debt, and debt rescheduling means delaying the interest and principal or changing the terms and conditions. Since the World War II, only China, Cuba, and North Korea have followed this debt repudiation. The low level of repudiations partly reflects the recent international policy towards the poorest countries in the world. Specifically, in the autumn 1996, the World Bank, the IMF, and major governments announced the world agreed to forgive the external debt of the world's poorest, most heavily indebted countries. So this decision essentially led to the decline in debt repudiation. Debt rescheduling was also experienced by South Korea in January 1998, Argentina in 2000, and Greece in 2011 and 12. One of the interesting questions in the provisions of international financial services is why we observe that international debtor problems that are being met by rescheduling in the post-World War II period, whereas a large portion of the debt problems were met with repudiations before the World War II. Okay, so my question is, after the World War II, we observe more commonly is debt rescheduling. On the other hand, before World War II, we observe the repayment problem eventually led to debt repudiation. So what's the reason? A fundamental reason given for this difference in behavior is that until recently, most post-war international debt has been in bank loans, whereas before the World War, it was mostly in the form of foreign bonds. Now, one point we need to understand that there is generally fewer financial institutions in any international lending syndicate compared to thousands of geographically dispersed bondholders. The relatively small number of lending parties makes renegotiation or rescheduling easier and less costly than when a borrower or a bond trustee has to get thousands of bondholders to agree to changes in the contractual terms of a bond. So since the debt rescheduling was more common after the Second World War because the lending was mostly in the form of bank loans rather than in the form of bonds. The second reason of this difference is many international loan syndicates comprise the same groups of financial institutions, which adds to financial institutions' cohesiveness in loan renegotiation and increases the probability of consensus being reached. And thirdly, many international loan contracts contain cross-default provision such that if a country were to default on just one of its loan, all the other loan it has outstanding would also automatically be put forth into default. So cross default clause prevent a country from selecting a group of weak lenders for a special default treatment and make the outcome of any individual loan default decision potentially very costly for the borrower. So these are the reasons we observe more commonly is the debt rescheduling after the Second World War and loan repudiation before the Second World War. A further set of reasons why rescheduling is likely to occur on loans relates to the behavior of governments and regulators in lending countries. One of the overwhelming public policy goals in recent years has been to prevent large financial institutions' failures in developed nations, including Australia, New Zealand, Singapore, the US, Japan, Germany, and the United Kingdom. This government organized the rescue packages for LDCs, I mean less developed countries, arranged either directly or indirectly via World Bank or IMF guarantees at the ways of subsidizing large financial institutions and reducing the incentives for LDCs to default on their loans. To the extent that banks are viewed as a special, domestic governments may seek political or economic avenues to reduce the probability of foreign sovereign borrowers defaulting on or repudiating their debt contracts. So that's the end of our discussion on different forms of sovereign risk. In the next video, we will discuss how we can evaluate a country's risk profile. Thank you very much.